Awakening, Queen of Spades No. 1 by E.J. Dawson. Dawson has created a delicious villain in Ayla. Awakened after 3,000 years, this ruthless woman handles whatever comes her way, soaking up spaceships, interstellar travel, politics, corporate criminals, intrigue, and a fabulous new array of weaponry for her assassin's skills. But it's not all straight up for Ayla, though there is a stack of fast-paced action. The author takes Ayla through a roller coaster ride of emotion, recovery, betrayal, and discovery that keeps you turning the page to see what she has to handle next. The prose is sharp, spare, and clear. The action is snappy and the characters develop well over the book. The author sneaks in a few small pauses to let us catch our breath, painting in the future world and its people and culture. Then we're off again. Ayla's gift comes with its thorns, and the multiple storylines have us following twists and turns as Ayla's rescuers get into a stack of trouble of their own. The author pushes Ayla's buttons as she explores her new team relationships and regains her sense of adventure after her long hibernation. Add in some mystical and emotional connection to the supernatural nature of her gift, and you have a wonderful sci-fi action romance. And the science and technology are beautifully drawn for my liking, a lovely balance of the possible and the probable matched with an imagination that has captured the future world building so well. The ending is only frustrating because the sequel is not yet published. Awakening, Queen of Spades No. 1 is well worth your time.
Once upon a time. Welcome to Australian Book Lovers, your destination for imagination.
A warm welcome to everyone, all of our listeners, writers, readers, and anybody else who might have logged on to the Australian Book Lovers podcast. Thank you for joining us. Our mission is to bring fabulous Australian and Indigenous literature that spans a whole range of genres to book lovers around the globe, as well as fantastic resources and information for passionate authors looking to write their next bestseller. I'm Veronica Strachan, aka V.E. Patton, fantasy, memoir and picture book writer, reader, one of your co-founders and hosts for this evening's podcast, coming to you today from Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung country.
And I am Darren Kazenko, dystopian science fiction and horror author, avid reader, and one of your co-founders and co-hosts of the Australian Book Lovers podcast, coming to you today as always, although hopefully soon there'll be a little bit of a change here and there. But for today, once again, coming to you from Corner Country. And episode number 38, Veronica. It's
38.
That train's still trugging along. We're getting there.
The train is still trugging. You know, I think we might catch up to my age. Not too soon, but a little while.
in the future. But yeah, so the train, well, in this, for number 38, this is, I guess you could say, it's a little bit of a steam train of some sort. Maybe even an odd one, but yes.
I saw 38. What you did there.
Yeah, so fantastic.
Because tell us a little bit about the author that we'll be chatting to, or that you chatted to, and we'll be listening to later in the episode.
And yes, because episode 38, we have the wonderful Mr. B.G. Hilton. So he's a steampunk author who was very gracious in letting me interview him. And he is a man of many talents. And the conversation went into so many cool places. And for example, one of the cool things about Mr. B.J. Hilton, besides his amazing literary skills, is he is also a fan of, as you'll discover, In Search Of. So that was very exciting for me because I actually used to have the In Search Of series on while I was writing the Hallucigenia project. And I'd have that on the background. And it's still creepy to this day. But anyway, so Mr. B.G. Hilton today, a wonderful guest, a wonderful person to interview. And but very excited for episode number 38.
Very good indeed. And steampunk is a really interesting, genre to look at. I did a little bit of research after, we thought that this would be a good one to look at. And some sort of resources suggest that it's really been around for way longer than you would imagine. So rather than it being the 1980s, even though they said that's kind of when it happened, and it's supposedly the tongue-in-cheek variant of cyberpunk. They've said that even around the early 19th century, way back in Victorian times, they're suggesting that Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was in fact, could really be said to be a steampunk. So
that's an interesting point.
It's really interesting because according to if we go straight to the very important place, Wikipedia, it says that steampunk is a subgenre of science fiction that incorporates retro futuristic technology and aesthetics inspired by 19th century industrial steam-powered machinery. And of course, it often works in the alternative history of the Victorian era or the American Wild West, where steam power is still that kind of mainstream use. And it can be in fantasy world that kind of employs the steam power. But there's lots of different steam cannons that, get there as opposed to the cannon that blows up. But, the cannon of work, it can be romance, it can be thriller, it can be mystery, it can be all sorts of things. Now, we have one of our authors in Christmas Australis, the frighteningly festive anthology of spine-jingling tales, who uses a cosy mystery. So well. Yeah, a cosy mystery steampunk, and that's Madeline D'Este, who will be coming up in our Christmas special episode. And yeah, as I say, she's her own particular steam-powered steampunk.
Yeah, and look, I did a little bit of research myself, but what really intrigued me was that this concept or the idea that the steampunk in essence is like you said, retroactive technology and aesthetics, but also the ability to travel back to a point in time and then reimagine technologies with a slight twist. So as if imagine things were invented slightly differently, and so I thought that's really cool. It's a really interesting way to approach a setting and and technology and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, very cool, and so obviously very exciting to be able to talk with Mr. BG Hilton, my apologies. And well, look, I was thinking I'd do a quick little spotlight on Champagne Charlie and the Amazing Gladys. So yes. How about we jump to some news?
Go for it.
Yay! So yes, for the news today, I just thought I'd spotlight the book by Mr. B.G. Hilton, and which is obviously we'll be having a bit of a chat about that today. And the book is again Champagne Charlie and the Amazing Gladys. For some reason, I'm having trouble saying champagne today. So Champagne Charlie and the Amazing Gladys, and it reads as follows. Hungover aristocrat Edward Charlie de Charles awakens in the back of a steam cab, only to discover that the driver has been murdered. Unused to feeling responsible for anything, he feels compelled to find the killer. As he investigates, he meets the amazing Gladys Dunchurch, a stage magician's assistant whose employer has disappeared, and not in a good way. They form an alliance. Charlie will help Gladys with his considerable resources, and Gladys will help Charlie with her even more considerable brains. Soon they discover that their respective mysteries are not only connected to each other, but related to other seemingly unrelated strangeness transpiring in London. The murder of an astronomer, an attack on a patent medicine factory, a mysterious cult in an idyllic town, and reports of deadly creatures in the London sewers. Charlie and Gladys find themselves pitted against dead-eyed assassins, murderous pirates, wingless flying machines, and perhaps even creatures from beyond this earth. And lurking behind it all lies a sinister cabal that knows the secret origin of the steam-powered society that powers their world. Can our heroes save the day, or will the fallout from that secret destroy two worlds? Champagne Charlie and the Amazing Gladys is a fun, witty steampunk adventure yarn featuring a cast of eccentric characters. So if that doesn't make you want to run out and grab a copy and read straight away, I don't know what does.
It is absolutely on my to-be-read list.
Yes, and this is what we got to look forward to coming very shortly, and we'll dive into all of the things that inspired such a twisty, turny, cool story set in like an alternate reality with alternate technologies and monsters, and so good.
Yes.
And the other news I wanted to talk about, being a little bit of a short news segment today, because we are rolling into the month of December. And that means it is our very first Christmas special. And of course, Veronica, as we both know, the next episode will be a Christmas special. And we've got featuring some chats with a couple of the authors that were part of Christmas Australis, the anthology. So that's going to be super fun, and looking forward to having a good time with you recording that one, because it's going to be a little bit of an opportunity to look back at some of the stuff we've done since beginning the podcast, and some of the audio adventures we've had, and some of the laughs and the excitement and the cool things we've learned along the way, and of course a good opportunity to chat about Christmas Australis and the whole process of putting together the anthology, which you did so magnificently. So stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. Episode 39 will be our very first ever Christmas special. So very excited, and so I'm happy to bring that as part of the news today.
Excellent news. I have to say that's probably the best news we've had for a while.
Yes, well, December is actually, I'm trying to look forward to Christmas this year. I've never been a big Christmas person, so I'm trying to get in the Christmas spirit this time, and baubles and tinsel, and
very good.
I'm not going to hum any Christmas tunes while I'm shopping, but well, actually I'm going to try and avoid all shopping, but still I'm going to try and slide in with a smile on my face.
There you go. Of course, I think I've talked to you about, we do Christmas lights and ridiculous things around here. So husband and daughter, who's are the ones most keen on putting the lights up, they're gathering their forces to get the boxes out and start stringing them all over the front garden and around the back and all those kind of things. So then you kind of know that Christmas is coming. So a little bit early for the tree yet around our place, but it's certainly beginning. You can see people stringing lights and standing on roofs and doing ridiculous things. But yes, excellent. Look forward to that episode. And in the meantime, just a little bit of news. There's a couple of things that I wanted to mention. One is that the Australia Council has Elevate, which is a $5,000 career development grant opportunity open to First Nations writers, editors, illustrators and arts workers in the literature sector. And it's going to help them develop career pathways. Now, those applications close on December 14th, which is fantastic. So you'll still have a little bit of time to get into those. There's also the 2022 Cat Musket Fellowship to develop young writers and editors from around Australia. And applicants must be a person of an underrepresented gender and be aged 16 to 30. And those applications close on the 16th of January. So that's a good thing. And the other little piece of news was that this happens at the Wheeler Centre, and there's a series called The Stories We Tell Ourselves. And along with the British Council, the Australian Government, the British, what are they? The British Council, they're called, and the UK Australia Seasons Patrons Board, they're bringing together diverse children's and adult fiction writers and publishers from inclusive independent presses and academics active in bringing about change in the publishing industry from Britain and Australia. So the series, The Stories We Tell Ourselves, provides a space for reflection and challenge through opening up the conversation on equity and social justice and the stories we get to hear. So it's all, these three little news things were all about that kind of diversity. So the first one is will be finished, I think, by the time this episode, or maybe not. Well, there's one at the end of November, 1st of December, but the one I wanted to talk to you about just a little bit more was the one that happens at the Wheeler Centre, which is in Victoria, on the 2nd of December. And that's called Representation, Voice and Agency. And it's a live-streamed panel discussion which brings together, as I mentioned, agents and publishers from the UK and Australia to consider how the publishing industry can better facilitate access and inclusion. So, what initiatives exist, what are the areas for improvement, and as we know, there is that tendency for still at the head of a lot of these, publishing sector for them to be middle-aged white gentleman. So it will be good to hear from Crystal Mahi-Morgan, the founder of Own It, Rachel Binsala, who's a publisher at Magabala Books, which is an Australian small press, and Emma Patterson, who's a literary agent at Aitken Alexander Associates, Grace Heifetz, who's a literary agent at the Left Bank Literary, and it's going to be hosted by Joy Francis, who's the executive director at Words of Colour Production. And the event is going to be live captioned, so I love that they are endeavouring to, be the people that they are trying to represent, which is fantastic to have all of those things there. So have a look. You'll find things under the wheelercentre.com events, and just, think about booking in to listen to an hour of some really important conversations.
Yeah, and I think it's just great that they're inviting the conversation to instigate change.
Yeah.
I think it's, how many industries do that consciously? Yeah. I know change happens sometimes, it happens regardless of whether someone wants it to happen or not. But it's great to hear that change is actually being desired in this instance.
Yeah, and really taking some active steps to, look at how we can change things and make things more accessible. So it's good. I like it. So I think that is all my news. There are, of course, people being acquired all over the place, and New Zealand book sales are opening up as sort of, Auckland retail reopens. Be interesting to see how our retail figures do after, Melbourne and Sydney are a bit, are open now. Great book reading places, but we'll see how the event, no doubt the retailers will let us know in a couple of months how they've survived.
Well, fingers crossed, to try and find some sort of icing on the cake, so to speak, when it comes to the COVID and lockdown. Fingers crossed that as everybody starts emerging from their homes, that the number of new book addicts is grown exponentially, because I'm sure, I can only imagine that some people have discovered reading in a way that they haven't done before, and maybe realised, discovering the joy and the magic that comes from a good book, and maybe now, prior to COVID, they might not have put, much effort in hunting down a good book, or dedicating that time to just, relax and read a bit. But maybe after spending a lot of time indoors and escaping with the wonders of, literary magic, maybe a new addiction has grown, and they'll come running out and start hunting all the bookstores for their next big adventure and escape. So
which would be good. And don't forget, Christmas is coming, and
yes, of course,
you can always buy your children books, or anybody a book, really.
Yes, and of course you can support Australian artists and Australian authors. So
yes,
it's a win-win Christmas. You can put an Australian title under the Christmas tree, and you'll put a smile on an Australian author.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I did see an interesting list with Alison Tate, who's not only is she an author, but she also has a couple of podcasts. One with the So You Want to Be a Writer with Val on from the Australian Writers Centre, but also she has I think the next great read. I'm not quite sure what the name of it is, but I did like that she was promoting 21 books for kids who like science. So she has a few different people who put lists together, several times through the years, and this is books for kids who like science, in brackets, and for kids who don't know they like science yet. So it's a great list, and it's on her website. So that's Alison Tate, ALLISON, Tate, TAIT.com. And you can have a look at books for kids. So STEM books, we're talking about STEAM. So many people are still interested in STEAM. Just up the road from us on the edge of our little township, there's a STEAM rally area. They've got a little train, and they have a festival once a year, and lots of people get up there with their steam engines, whether they've taken them out of trains or tractors or all sorts of things, and they'll have races, or they'll try and have the steam tractor pull weights and those kind of things. So steam is fascinating.
Yeah, I think from a interest side of things, it's one of those science that you can see physically happening.
Yes.
I can't see the inside of a computer, and look, a car engine is a little bit over my head, and most of us tucked away anyway.
Yeah.
But there's something about seeing that steam, and we've got the steam train down here on the Fleurieu Peninsula. and it's still everyone crowds on it, and it's just something something cool and about the aesthetic of that steam, and the noise and so I guess it's just the simplicity, in the beauty and the simplicity maybe, and the science happening before your eyes,
and something that if the world does go kaput in a kind of dystopian way, a catastrophe, that steam is something that could be reasonably got going again using water and fuel. Who knows? Anyway, we're not talking about fossil
fire and water
fuels.
really is all you need.
Yeah.
So the ingredients are, there's plenty. Not going to run out of that ingredient, hopefully. If we do, then there's no point worrying about building an engine.
Yeah.
But something that may not be science, or maybe, I don't know. I'll leave that up to the listeners. But just before we finish the news, is when it comes to the number 38, which is episode 38.
Yeah.
Did you know that 38 is the largest even number which cannot be written as the sum of two odd composite numbers? And 38 is the largest known even number which can be represented as sum of two distinct primes in only one way. 37 and 38 are the first pair of consecutive positive integers not divisible by any of their digits. So just when you think 38 couldn't get any cooler though, and this is where the real science happens, in essence, the numerology number 38 is about relationships.
Right.
The relationships tend to sustain themselves through creative expression. Teamwork, pulling together, companionship, romance, diplomacy, cooperation, all are in the number 38's realm. And the number 38 also has an inherent talent for dealing with people in a creative and sensitive way. And the number 38 is a natural team worker. So 38 requires coexistence. Relationships within that coexistence is the energy of its essence, whether in the role of team member, romantic interest, special companion, friend, or other type of relationship, the essence of coexistence is always present. So there, science, maybe, I don't know, but the number 38. Yay!
Very good. All right. That's probably more, I now know more about 38 than I probably ever needed to, but that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I'm still trying to understand the first part. That sounds cool.
Okay. Sounds like it's about time for us to dive into your interview.
Absolutely. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for number 38, and I'm very proud to present an interview with a fantastic, intriguing, interesting, very kind, and just an all-round great guy, author, Mr. B.G. Hilton. Okay, Mr. B.G. Hilton, the man who confessed once slept through a riot, although I do believe only a small riot. Welcome to the Australian Book Lovers podcast show. How are you?
I'm great. Yeah, it's good to be here.
So we are here, of course, to talk about your debut novel, Champagne Charlie, and the amazing Gladys. And so for listeners who may not be aware of the novel or haven't had the opportunity yet to take a look at our science fiction section, where you can find the listening book, I thought I would give a very brief synopsis of the Champagne Charlie and the Amazing Gladys, and then thinking we can maybe get down to the nuts and bolts of your inspiration, your writing, and who you are in general. So the general synopsis is that London, the 19th century, Victoria sits on the throne of an empire powered by caloric fluid, heat in pure liquid form. Caloric steam engines power ships, aeroplanes, cars and trains. The world runs on caloric, and Lord Grimsdale controls the caloric. In a little music hall in East London, Australian singer Gladys Dunchurch finds herself working for a second-rate stage musician who has one first-rate trick: a mysterious wand that allows the user to teleport someone over a short distance. When the magician disappears, and not in a good way, it is up to Gladys to find him. Perhaps fortunately, Gladys runs into the Honourable Edward Charlie de Charles. The unlikely pair form an alliance. Charlie will help Gladys with his considerable resources, and Gladys will help Charlie with her even more considerable brains. Their investigations only leads to more questions. Charlie and Gladys find themselves pitted against dead-eyed assassins, murderous pirates, wingless flying machines, and perhaps even creatures from beyond this earth. And lurking behind it all lies a sinister cabal that knows the secret origin of the steam-powered society. Can our heroes save the day, or will the fallout from that secret destroy two worlds? Very, very, very awesome synopsis, and it definitely promises a whole big, wide-ranging adventure. So I guess the first question, or two questions I've got for you, Ben, if you don't mind if I call you Ben.
Okay. Yep.
So what is because we are talking about essentially a steampunk novel.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, what definition do you prefer when you find yourself describing to someone what steampunk is? So, for example, to myself, who I can't say I'm very well versed in steampunk, and also when was it that you discovered that the steampunk world was all for you?
All right. Well, steampunk. It's the easiest way to describe it, I think, is to talk about, say, it's a science fiction sort of setting, but based on a Victorian aesthetic. It's sort of something like I've often found the easiest way to explain it is just say, have you ever seen the Disney version of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea? And then people sort of get the idea pretty much straight from that. The idea of some sort of incredible technology, but it's sort of all put together with nuts and bolts, and it runs on steam, and it's sort of, the captain in charge probably has a big top hat on, and it's it's sort of I think it sort of dates back there to the 60s when they sort of started sort of reinventing those Victorian stories for a modern audience, and sort of obviously when they wrote them originally, they weren't trying to make them nostalgic in any way. They're trying to make them as futuristic as possible. But when we started looking back to them, they have this sort of clunky, old-fashioned look to them, and that's sort of the aesthetic behind steampunk. That, and also the being a little critical of that whole sort of Victorian society as well. It's not just sort of, wouldn't it be lovely to be back then when everyone was very polite and sort of well dressed, but there's also sort of looking at the underbelly of it, the nastiness behind that sort of very lovely facade.
Uh-huh. And when was it that you fell into into that world? Like what drew you into the steampunk and machines? And
I've always loved history. I've always loved that sort of I've always loved those sort of style of machines. If you see them in museums and things, I'm not an engineer. I'm a bit of a technophobe actually, but you see those old machines, and even someone like me, you can look at them and you can sort of gather how they work. You see I see a computer. There's this box here that it does this magic stuff. I see a steam engine, and I can look at it and I can see, I can sort of see how that works. The steam goes through here, and the power comes there, and I don't understand it perfectly, but I understand roughly how it works. And you just can't do that with the, I have a phone which is magic as far as I'm concerned. It could have a genie in it. I wouldn't know.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely on your side of the team, because I really do appreciate what you're saying there, because you're right. So it's even like certain old farm equipment, even going back, you can sort of see how it works. And even me, myself, being a complete non-engineer, there are certain elements where if something broke in those sorts of machineries that you're talking about, I could probably work out a way to fix it sometimes. Whereas with a computer, I mean, sometimes I'll sit here and still try and work out the technology behind a TV. In the sense of where is the command module that tells all the pixels to change and develop this? It's just mind blowing. I know there is a science behind it, but I still, like you, think it's a little bit of magic or alien technology. I don't know. But one of the aesthetics, the visual aesthetic, I think, you brought up 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and even for example with the cover for your book, which is like very striking. I kind of feel as though steampunk was almost, obviously it's an alternative history, or at least an alternative technological path, but there's something, if the machinery itself is dated, but when you put it in that steampunk sort of aesthetic, it becomes a timelessness. Does that make sense? Do you think that's an attractiveness to it?
I think so. I think like I say, there's a timelessness to it, and it's a lot of that old stuff is genuinely quite beautiful. I mean, you read someone like Dickens, who was writing about sort of factory machinery, and he sort of describes it as almost this sort of monstrous satanic nightmare. But you look at it now, and there's a real beauty to it, and timelessness. Yeah, I think you're right, and I think it attracts a lot of people to it. I mean, in addition to books and movies and so forth, there's a whole sort of steampunk subculture, which is just a sort of which is based around sort of dressing up in this way, and sort of it's very interesting.
Okay, and what about in the collecting side of things? Is that something? Does steampunk have a collecting group, or?
I'm sure. So sorry, I'm sure it does. I don't know really much about that sort of side of it, but yeah, I'm sure it has a collecting group. People who are sort of into like serious steam engine restoration and things. There's a bit of crossover with the steampunk community. I think I'm not sure it's very strong though. I think it's a slightly different angle.
Mm-hmm. But still, definitely a fascinating world, whether it's
yeah.
literature or movies or the machinery itself. And I'm sure there'd be small items that you could probably hunt down in the right place, which I think would look fantastic. And a lot of the steampunk sort of art style, so whether it be sculptures and stuff, is most of the stuff I've seen is actually modern, as in it's been built or modelled or designed in the last 10 years or so to capture that old school feel, but timeless feel, which is really cool.
Yeah, I know some people sort of make steampunk stuff by taking apart genuine antiques and things, but A, it's very expensive, and B, I think people aren't very keen on that for preservation reasons. So yes, a lot of it is just sort of built out of more modern materials. Yeah, but given that sort of brass and mahogany sort of facade, not facade, coating sort of.
Yes.
That's not the word I'm looking for. Veneer. That's
veneer.
The word I'm looking for.
Almost skeletal with a shine.
Yeah. Yes.
So you mentioned 20,000 Under Leagues Under the Sea and movies. And so one thing I want to jump into, which I found fascinating, is obviously your love for Frankenstein movies. And now, and for the listeners out there, now we will have links in the show notes, but if you do yourself a favor and visit Ben's website, you'll find a whole series of essays on the various Frankenstein movies. And from what I gathered when I had a look, it's basically covering the whole spectrum for the whole history. So
there's plenty more.
Well, I was going to ask if you thought Reanimator belonged on the list, so I'm sure that's probably
absolutely, yeah,
of course, Lovecraft. But I'm wondering, when it comes to your passion for Frankenstein movies and stories, are you drawn more towards the visual aesthetics, that monster imagery, and I guess the steampunk background elements to that imagery as well, or are you more drawn to that theme of raising the dead or creating life, having the power of life, or both?
Well, that's the thing I love about Frankenstein as a metaphor. It's so many things. It's sort of it's fear of technology. It's to do with life and death. It's to do with in a distorted sort of way, to do with parenthood. It's there are so many different angles to it, and that's why I love looking at all the different film versions, because they take such very different ways of addressing this. The original novel, if you read it, it's a great novel. Thematically, it's a little hard to get into sometimes, because there's so many different ideas I think that Mary Shelley had sort of bouncing around her head, and sometimes I'm not sure knows quite which direction she wants to take. And this gives us this novel, which is which you can look at in so many different ways. And filmmakers over the years have done that, just come into it from all these different directions and added to the lore over the years. In the original novel, I don't think there's any mention of a brain. There's one mention of a lightning strike and that hits a tree. It's got nothing to do with life and death. But then we add those things in the early movies, and other things come in later, and then Igor turns up in the 40s, I think, and so on over the years, until it's just this massive snowball of sort of different things. And it's sorry, I get very carried away by talking.
No, please, I think it's amazing, and absolutely, I think you hit the nail on the head with that. There's so many angles to if you're going to delve into Frankenstein plot, it's going to depend on who approached it and what they saw in it, or what they used it to, what they wanted to represent using that story of Frankenstein.
I actually have an unpublished as yet manuscript based on a modern day descendant of Frankenstein, which it really needs a bit of work before I can take it to a publisher. But yeah, it's such a fascinating. It's
Of course, that was going to be one of my questions. So you jumped to that one. And is that something that you've completed recently, or is it something you've sort of been working on for quite a while?
I wrote it quite a while ago, and I did try shopping around publishers, and I sort of put it aside for a bit, and I came and had a look at it later, and I think I see where the problems are with it. And when I get some time, which, between having a full-time, having a mostly full-time job and a 3-year-old, it's finding that time is the tricky part. When I get some time, I'm going to sort of try to knock it into shape and see if I can find a publisher or self-publish it. I mean, that's also an option.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And look, you obviously, you're writing, a lot of essays on movies themselves. Yeah. Have you ever thought to try a hand at screenplay as well?
Oh, yeah, that'd be. I don't know a lot of people in that sort of area. I think if I knew more sort of amateur, I know a couple of people who do amateur filmmaking, but I don't know a lot. If I knew more, maybe I'd give it a try. But one of the things I've been looking at recently, and I haven't actually written the essays up yet, is some of the more recent, fairly cheaply made amateur Frankensteins, and they don't always work quite so well. It's there is a richness to that sort of visual that you get in the slightly bigger budget Frankenstein movies that you don't quite get in the cheaper ones, even if they're well thought out. So that would be something I'd have to think about. But
Yeah.
no, sorry. Short answer to your question, no.
Yeah, because I mean, screenplays obviously are a lot, well, not quicker, because you hear these tales of, it took a year and a half to write the screenplay, but but in general, I think as a general rule, 90 pages, because it's I think the guide is a minute per page.
That's what they say, yeah.
And of course, it gets shorter if you've got, because one or three sentences or one page might take 5 minutes of screenplay, But yeah, that's something to think about. But I'm wondering. Well, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you so much, because when I was looking through the list, I was so happy to see that you included the one and only original Death Race 2000, with probably now one of the funniest Frankensteins ever.
Yes.
That is such a doozy of a movie, and
I do love that film. Yeah.
Carradine strutting around in his undies with a strange mask that just fires. Yeah, is something to behold. And of course, Sylvester Stallone in one of his first roles, if not his first major role, I think, or as in major film, as opposed to skin flick.
Yeah. It's surprising how many big actors come out of Roger Corman movies.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And wondering, did you ever see Ken Russell's Gothic?
Oh, I haven't. No, I it's on my list. I haven't actually had a chance to watch it yet. The way I've gone through sort of looking at all these Frankenstein movies, it's that whole, why are you looking over here? Well, the light's better. These are the easiest ones to get my hands on, and some of them are a little. I don't think I've seen Gothic around anymore. I should have a look for it.
No, to be, I've got a copy on VHS, which is which I was very lucky
talk
to
about
get.
old-fashioned technology.
Yeah. No, I've still got a VHS. In fact, I've got my laptop sits on top of my VHS player. So when I'm working or writing, I usually have an old VHS playing, just for a bit of atmosphere. But no, the reason why I ask is because now I'm not too familiar with Mary Shelley's story as an author, but from what I gather, the film Gothic is Ken Russell's interpretation of what is one idea of what may have inspired the Frankenstein story, and it's about her and the other artists in the castle. And in this movie, they're essentially taking what I believe to be opium or some sort of hallucinogenic, and then it's just this night of chaos and symbolism, and in that old language where they're 1 minute they're frantic and manic, and the next minute they're in despair, and it finishes with the inspiration. Well, this artist's interpretation on what inspired Mary Shelley to create Frankenstein. So, but it's very cool movie. So yes, but not only Frankenstein movies. Another, I think we cut from similar cloth, because I saw on your website, of course, that you are also very interested in Search Of.
I love that show. It's like, I don't know. It's like chips in gravy. I love it so much, even though it's very, very bad for you. I grew up watching that show. I mean, it's for those of you who don't know. Sorry, some of the younger viewers might not know this one. It was. In fact, it's even some of the oldest might know, because it was shown in Australia as Great Mysteries of the World, and it had. It was a series of documentaries narrated by the great Leonard Nimoy, who passed away recently, and about all sorts of. Some of them fairly sensible topics, but some of them just some crazy nonsense. UFOs, Loch Ness monster, Bigfoot. Bigfoot is sort of an all-time favorite. Great fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I grew up with it as well. And it's funny because I remembered. I thought I've got a memory of it being called In Search Of, but maybe I can't remember that.
It might have been, you're in Adelaide, it might have been shown on your local station differently, but in Sydney it was repackaged as something called Great Mysteries of the World, and it had this sort of orchestral fanfare instead of the actual theme. And
okay.
Yeah,
I think. Well, so, and I grew up loving that, and the thing is, it was quite scary as a kid,
and terrifying.
And it wouldn't matter what the subject was. There was something about the atmosphere that was creepy, and especially because I remember it used to be on Saturday afternoons, if I remember correctly, late afternoon. So even in that time slot, it was a bit creepy. But when I was finished or was working on the last book, I would have to have stuff in the background, and I actually downloaded the whole series of In Search Of, and so I had them playing in the background while I was working, and every now and then I'd look up and go, you know what, it's creepier now than what it was back then. I don't know what it is. It's the ambience, the monotonous, sound, the monotonous narrator, and then maybe it's a little bit more scary, that weird stuff. But the irony is, when I heard the UFO, one of the UFO episodes start, and then one of the experts came on, and before I looked up, I was picturing what it looked like. And to all our listeners out there, if you do want to take the In Search Of challenge, you can find them on YouTube. Look up the UFO one, and then when you hear the experts start talking, picture that person what it looks like, and then have a look at the screen, and I'm willing to bet you $100 that the image matches your exact thought. The only thing missing was a beret, although I think it does have a beret with the goatee at one point. But yeah, they're fantastic. You got the Killer Bees, which was awesome. The Life After Death one, which is quite creepy. The Voodoo, of course, Ghosts. But it's funny because an author I interviewed earlier today, he's a scientist, and one of his loves is the exploration of plant communication.
Oh yeah, that was the very first episode.
Yeah. So what they were talking about in Search Of is actually now an established science, but back then it looks like all hocus pocus. So yes, In Search Of may not be too out there. It may have actually foretold a lot of stuff. And I mean, Bigfoot's always scary.
It is, and I don't know why it's scary. I mean, if you live in Sydney, there is literally nothing that is less likely to hurt you than Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster, and yet still somehow they were terrifying. It was...
Well, chatting with this gentleman, he was mentioning that I think an hour south of Sydney somewhere, it must have been, I don't know, maybe in the mountainous region, but apparently there's a particular pine tree or species of pine that was only discovered 20 years ago. As in for the first time ever. And so my question was,
is that the Wallamai pine? Or?
That's the one, yeah.
That's the one, yeah.
Yeah, so now if that could be that close to Sydney and no one discover it until only 2000 or 1990, I'm sure animals can still be out there. So yeah, I'm sure Bigfoot is definitely possible.
You hear reports from people in the mountains sometimes of big cats, which supposedly have escaped from a zoo or a circus or something, but you never know.
Oh wow, okay. Yeah, that's something I'd be scared of in real life, is a big cat. I like my miniature version, and even that scares me if he wants to go at you with claws. Now, so so yes, In Search Of, definitely fantastic, and some cool inspiration when I was reading through your website. So many awesome stuff. Now, but back to the book stuff.
Oh yes, yep.
So obviously your debut novel. So I guess one thing I'd like to know is the process of putting the book together, and even maybe the pitching part as well. But were there any surprising insights or lessons that you took away from the experience of putting the book together that you didn't quite expect or came as a very big surprise? Or
that's an interesting one. Writing a novel is something I always wanted to do, and I guess it when you actually sit down to write it, I guess it's surprising just how much work it is. I mean that's no surprise to any writer. You write your first novel, it's an uphill battle. I think I impressed myself. I think I impressed myself with my own discipline, and I don't say that lightly. I've always enjoyed writing. I've never been a very disciplined writer, and I think one of the things I learned from that is how to be a bit more disciplined, how to just keep going, even if you don't feel like it, even if you're not in the mood, even if you don't necessarily have a good idea. We'll go back and pick something you wrote before. Just I think I learned that bit about myself, that I'm what you're capable of, if that makes sense. Yeah, that would be my main takeaway from it.
So, for example, moving forward, is there any key elements, methods, or tools, or tricks that you've picked up that you're definitely going to incorporate in as you move forward in your writing career? So, obviously, discipline is definitely such an important factor. But like maybe methods of editing while you go. Those little things.
When writing, that was the first complete novel manuscript I wrote. Since then, when I've been trying to write novel manuscripts, I've been making sure I've been really sort of trying to get the shape of the novel hammered out much earlier. When I wrote that, I had basically my starting point, my end point, and I had no idea what was going to happen in the middle. And it just took a very long time to take all the threads of the story and sort of fit them together in a way that makes sense. It is actually a slightly complicated plot. Some might say overcomplicated. Sorry, I probably shouldn't say that. That's when people are writing reviews on Goodreads, that's the big complaint, that the plot's a little overcomplicated, and maybe they're right. But
some people love it. The more complicated, the better.
Some people do. Some people said nice things about that. But anyway, that's my point. Is I was trying to do that in my head. Someone actually asked me this the other day. How did you do that? And I said, I don't know. I just kept it all in my head, and it was a really bad way to do it. I should have diagrammed it, or had some post-it notes, or drawn a picture or anything. And that's what I've done in later manuscripts that I learned from this one is, make sure not just the beginning and the end, but the whole sort of rough shape of it. And you can go off in different directions if you change your mind, that's fine. But as long as you've got that sort of a clear outline, then that makes it a lot easier for you.
And do you find yourself now actually doing charts or plot charts, and have you got sticky notes all over the place, or is it more a case of you fine tune it in your mind and then get it down on some sort of guide paper?
I sort of do, I don't have when I try sort of drawing diagrams by hand, I end up with this mess. So I basically try to do it in dot points and maybe in a couple of different columns. So I have, what's going on in this plot thread in here, sort of trying to line it up with the next one. I find it easy to organize my thoughts in words and in pictures mostly, but just have something down in much more detail. But also give yourself room to move. When I tried to write the Frankenstein novel I was telling you about, I sort of plotted it out very precisely. And then when I wrote it, it ended up being half as long as I expected.
Oh, okay.
Just because things just moved from plot point to plot point to plot point, and sort of it was a bit flat. And then sort of I went through and sort of messied it up a little. Had some other things going on which were distracting people from the directions they were supposed to be going, and ended up with a slightly richer novel, I think.
Well, so kind of like a Frankenstein, you build it, like, do the frame, the skeleton to the frame, and then you want to inject that life into it. So you need to bolt lightning and send things a little bit haywire.
Yeah.
When it came to the actual publishing process, so how did you get from finishing the manuscript, and obviously you did some sort of submitting? Was it a long time from when you started submitting or sending out your manuscript to when you actually stepped into that publishing realm, or was it something that happened quickly?
Quite a while. I started when I started sending it. I sent it out to a bunch of people. I at this time I didn't really know much about the publishing processes. Beginning writers often don't, and I didn't really have a very clear focus on where I was going to send it. And as I went, I sort of refined it, and I sort of sent it to a few places that were a bit more, rather than, I'll send it to Penguin Publishing in America and see what they do. Of course, they're not going to take. So you start looking at sort of more reasonable sort of venues. And then the one I sent it to Odyssey Books, who I should have mentioned before, honestly, Odyssey Books, who published the book, and I put it in through their submission process, and it just happened. I didn't hear back from them, and you don't hear back from someone, you just assume the answer's no. And I looked at the sort of submittable page sometime later, and I saw it was still there as sort of pending. And I thought I should probably follow that up just in case. And I sent an email up to my publisher, the person who is now my publisher, and I said, "You still got this up as pending. Did you want to take that down?" She said, "Oh no, I want to publish the novel." And my wife was sitting opposite.
Good way to find it.
Yeah. My wife was sitting opposite me at the table, and she asked, "Are you having a stroke?" Because and I wasn't. I didn't see that coming. I thought it was just tidying up a loose end, and it sort of it was a very big surprise and a wonderful feeling.
Oh, no doubt. It must have been a spectacular feeling, and obviously a door opening to a whole new world to discover.
Yeah.
And how did you find the publishing side of things? So, for example, obviously working with an editor and different versions and the red pens and did you get and also as part of that, what sort of role did you have much of an input when it came to your cover, which I think is a wonderful cover?
Yeah, I love that cover. I have. The editing was good. I've actually by this point I'd actually had some other smaller pieces published elsewhere, and I've gotten a bit more used to being edited. And I was doing some work as a advertising copywriter, which gets you edited a lot too. And I sort of, after that initial sort of resentment, you sort of get used to it. It's good to have another pair of. When you write something, you always know exactly what you meant. And if someone else comes along and reads what you said and I have no clue what you meant, then that's actually good feedback, even if it's, you know, not necessarily pleasant to hear.
That's a really, really good way to explain it too, you know, the
Yeah,
importance of editing. That's the first one I've heard anyone say it like that. But yeah, you're right, because ultimately communication is what it's all about, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, if sometimes I mean, it happens in real life. You know, sometimes you say something and someone just looks at you blankly, and then you try saying it another way, and with writing, you've only got that one shot. Yeah. And that's why you need an extra pair of eyes is so very useful. Sorry, I'm meandering away from your question.
No, you absolutely answered the question. But yeah, just wanted to get an idea of you know, your experience diving into the publishing world, and you know, and I'm always interested about cover art too. I find it such a fascinating aspect. So. You know, was it something? Did you have a selection you could choose from? Did you give input?
Not so much. Michelle, my publisher, she said, you know, do you want some input into the cover? And I said, I don't know much about visual design, but I'd love a bit of input. And she said, okay. And then she came back a little while later with this cover, and I said, it's not great. And then she said, oh, never mind, someone snapped it up anyway and bought it. Has this cover and showed me the one you've seen. And I thought that's perfect. So I only ever saw two, and yeah, that's I couldn't ask for a better cover, honestly. I think it's just spot on.
Yeah, and it definitely pops out too. There's something about it. Yeah, it's got a really vibrant atmosphere. Yeah, definitely. And now it is a standalone story, is it, or is it going to be part of a series?
All right. Well, the plan when I started writing it, I'm not a very superstitious man, but I had this thing about tempting fate. I don't like to tempt fate. And so I didn't start writing a sequel until I was sure. My plan was to have some ideas for a sequel, but not actually start writing it until it was published.
Mm-hmm.
Where my book, so far I've been talking about the good news about my book. Here's the bad news, which was the launch date was at a local library on the very weekend that the library was shut down because of COVID.
Oh, no.
I know. And my marketing strategy was very heavily based on going to, you know, conventions and book shows and what have you, and trying to sell my book face to face. And obviously all of those were cancelled, and I had to very quickly pivot to trying to sell it online, which is not my forte, while at the same time starting a new job, which was taking up a lot of my time. And it could have gone a lot better, honestly.
Yeah.
So that's basically what I'm trying to do at the moment, is try to sort of make another push, basically, to get it out there. Now that things are opening up a little, and just a couple of weeks ago, eventually, my first time I actually had a chance to try to sell my book to a live audience at the University of Sydney, which was nice.
Oh, okay. How did you find that experience?
It was sort of interesting. As part of there's a pop culture festival called, you know, Pop Fest at the University of Sydney, and they just basically I said, can I come along and have a stall to sell my book? And they said, we're not having stalls because of the COVID, but could you give us this little speech about publishing? And I said, oh, yeah, okay. And so yeah, that was actually kind of good. It gave me a chance to put my own thoughts on the subject in a more systematic way, and yeah, also managed to sell a couple of books, which is nice.
Mission accomplished.
Because I got a little over ambitious about ordering them just before everything shut down, and there's a bunch of them in my brother-in-law's spare room now.
Well, now that things are opening up, hopefully everyone
fingers crossed. My
didn't spend all their money on booze, and they'll come running out ready to snatch up everything they can get their hands on.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yes, absolutely.
But yeah, sorry. But yeah, that was my experience, both, you know, the highs and lows of it. Of sort of, it's, you know, honestly, I mean, it was just bad. Like, when no one could have predicted it. It was just the absolute worst time that my book could have come out. It's just even a month earlier, and I think I might have had a bit of done a little better. But there you go.
Have you had the opportunity to reschedule something with the libraries?
That were my local library is sort of, you know, considering whether they want this sort of thing opening, and I've got some sort of requests in, and we'll see if they actually get back to me. But yeah, they were doing all their stuff online, and they were mostly working with people they already knew for obvious reasons, you know. But yeah, well, that's always the tricky thing when you're sort of, you know, new to a field. If you're a debut author or, you know, whatever, and is that there's books aren't cheap, and, you know, and if I, you know, if there's a new Stephen King book out, I know realistically it's not going to be my favorite book, but it's going to be okay. And so it's a safer bet to put my money down on that than someone I've never heard of. But yeah, such is life.
At the same time, I think, you know, if we can take anything out of, you know, these events that we've had, and probably still going to go through, is you know, in a way it forces any artistic venture really, whether it's music, writing, but it forces us to maybe think outside the square. And,
exactly.
And, you know, regroup, sit down, you know, take a new lay of the land and determine new strategies.
Absolutely.
Because it's, you know, I mean, it'd be wonderful if we were, you know, 50 city country and you could do a book tour and sleep in a van for a couple of months. You know, I'd definitely do it. I'd probably have so much fun I'd forget I was selling books. But it's not quite like that at the moment. You know, you just don't even know when things are going to be shut down again. But there's lots of different ways, like, you know, doing what you're doing now and being so kind enough just to join the podcast. So
sorry, I don't want to sound like I'm complaining. It's great to have my book out there and I'm doing well, but it's but it's a bummer
to happen when you're about to launch. And I think surely there's going to be a good chunk of listeners out there that are really into steampunk, and if they're not really into it, they're already thinking about dipping their toes. So definitely, yes. Now, when it comes to the actual physical act of writing, do you use do you use like any particular software? Like, so for example, I like to use the Scrivener platform, which has a few cool features, or are you a straight word processor, or
straight word? I like I say, I'm a bit of a technophobe. I've been using Word since the 90s, and I'm sort of scared to try anything else, honestly. It's sometimes you need to it's sometimes a little tricky if you need to move like a whole chapter or something around, but it works for my purposes.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, word processor has been since the TRS-80. I think I've been tapping away. Printers have come a long way. You know, now the ink's worth more than the printers. But but otherwise, at the end of the day, it's all word processing. Just some stuff has bells and whistles, or some really cool features as well. But what about good luck charms? Do you have anything? Do you like hang a little charm anywhere?
No, I don't actually. What do I don't even have a desk. I sometimes work at the table. I sometimes work on a sofa.
Well, then you must have if you're a mobile writer, I'm assuming you've got a good luck coffee mug.
No, I don't really. I'm like I say, I'm my big superstition is I don't like to tempt fate, but other than that, I'm not a very superstitious fellow. I just what do I have that's physically interesting? I try to listen when I try to listen quiet, right when it's quiet. I find that if I listen to music, it affects the the tone of the scene, and then if I come back and I'm trying to look at the same scene with a different song on it, it doesn't quite work.
Absolutely, that's why I put movies on, because it's
different.
I can stare up and just sort of watch it, and always old movies, but it's white noise, and then if I just need to break, I'll look up and enjoy something for 10 seconds. But you're I agree with you 100,000%. If I try and listen to music while I'm writing, then whatever the song is, whatever emotion content of the song, and as a music kind of gets me, gets right in there, but it affects the way you write. So, but I definitely use music when I'm editing. Because then I know what the atmosphere is for the particular chapter. So then I can tailor the music to really get me into the chapter even better, if that makes sense. So if it's an action, oh, cool, I'm going to edit this action sequence. Well, on goes the full-on music. But yeah, definitely not one to write with the music in the background. Silence, though, I don't know if I'm any good at that.
I usually just keep. I mean, unless there's something on at if I'm writing at the cafe and there's got something on, it doesn't bother me. But if I'm writing at home, I usually just don't put anything on. What else do I do? Coffee, lots of coffee. Particularly if I'm trying to write something funny. If I don't have enough coffee in me, I've got no sense of humor. Yeah, what other? I'm just trying to think of anything else.
It sounds like you're a man who all he needs is imagination and a bit of power to the laptop.
Yeah, mostly.
Which is probably the main two ingredients of any writing session, really.
They're the main
unless you're doing pen and paper.
Yeah, I sometimes pen and paper. I mostly just use for jotting down notes. My handwriting is terrible. If I tried to write anything longer than a list of dot points, I'd come back to it and be unable to read it. I think I'm lucky I can get through my shopping list, honestly.
And I still stand by the belief that if you write by hand, you're going to use different structure, different words, different pacing, different rhythm than when you're typing. Just because of the
I've heard that theory. I really just physically can't write enough to tell. Honestly, that's it.
And now, but you obviously do a lot of writing, because on your website you've also, now I'm guessing it's a series. It's called the South Hurtling Chronicles.
Oh yeah. That's
yeah. Wonder if you could tell myself and the listeners about that, because there's plenty there to dive into.
Yeah, I was when I started putting up my website. I was at the time. Right now, I'm kind of busy. At the time, I was sort of a little underemployed and a bit bored, and so I started writing this serial novel. It's sort of the least plotted thing I've ever written. It's sort of the idea was it's meant to be sort of like a fantasy soap opera set in a hardware shop. And
okay, that's a pretty good platform to start from.
And so it was basically there's a big box hardware shop called the Handy Pavilion, and it's sort of drifting towards open warfare with its arch rivals in the DIY barn. And I would just sort of add characters, there's a mad scientist, there's this sort of demonic creature, there's this sort of Tarzan-like character, there's a gnome that only comes to life under the full moon. I'm sorry, I'm maybe not giving the best sort of sales pitch I could, but basically the idea was just that they'd be having this sort of little sort of weird sort of adventure / soap opera while everything was going wrong, and this was just how I entertained myself on a Tuesday morning when I had nothing to do, and it sort of grew from there. I haven't written as much as I could have lately, just because I haven't had the time on my hands, but I should go back to it when I can, because yeah, it's fun. It's just
a war between hardware and DIY is sounds good. I'm sitting here picturing some demonic steampunk Bunnings marching across the freeway, or floating across the freeway.
It was a bit based on my local Bunnings at the time, and it's very vaguely, but all the characters, instead of sort of normal people, it was sort of staffed by increasingly. I think one of the characters gets severely injured and turns into the Phantom of the Opera at some point. It's just whatever I happen to be in the mood for that morning. It was made to be read sort of one chapter at a time. I think if you sort of keep reading through it maybe is a little silly, but if you sort of just accept that this is just one little vignette at a time, is part of a bigger picture, then it's good fun.
Yeah, that does sound really cool. So essentially, do you just when you have the time, you just add a chapter, but each chapter, I'm guessing, is standalone but set in the same store and same backdrop. But
and there's sort of an overarching plot which eventually comes. That's the basic idea, and I really quite enjoy. It's funny when I'm saying this to you, I'm sort of feeling, oh, should I be sort of trying to push this thing because it's a little silly? But actually, I really kind of like it. I've been half planning to sort of put it into tidy it up a bit and self-publish it. But I think I will actually. It's sort of. I started by sort of being self-depreciating and saying I'm not too sure about this thing, but actually now that I think of it, damn it, that's good.
There you go, exactly. And I mean, and instantly, I mean, the idea is wild, and it sounds like the process for you, as far as each time you do a chapter or add a section to it, it sounds to me like it's quite a very an exercise in literary freedom, because it doesn't sound like you've got any rules to worry about, and that can produce some absolute magic. When you can just let your imagination fly, and something tells me that the South Hurtling Chronicles probably is, a testament to just when you have the opportunity to let your imagination fly.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Sorry, I'm not being self-depreciating. It's like I quite like it.
So no sleep tonight. Now tonight you'll be putting the chapters together and working on the cover art.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And is it? So what is the status of the Chronicles at the moment? Is there still more that you want to add, or is it already kind of wrapped up at the moment?
I was about halfway through part 3, and it's sort of which is, we've moved on from the hardware war, and geez, it was a Trilobite Park. Basically, someone in this area has opened this theme park, which is based on resurrected Trilobites, and everything, of course, goes horribly wrong, and the Trilobites escape. And I got about halfway through that, and sort of I haven't had just the amount of time, I really should go back and finish that.
Yeah, because I think maybe it's the not the real Bunnings sausage sizzle. They get bad sausages, and they ends up being the secret weapon to kill the trilobites.
Oh, that's
special
okay.
army having to stuff these sausages down. So, now, when it does come to writing, Ben, what do you find inspires you to write if you have those moments when, the motivation might be taking a bit of a nap, or, you finally got time to yourself, obviously busy timetable, and the energy's starting to sort of fade away. Do you have anything that inspires you? Do you have a go-to, little reminder, or do you just, does it come back to that thing called discipline and you just sort of make yourself?
Yeah. I think that's the thing. I think sometimes if you, with a novel, I think if you haven't got anything to go, you've always got the option of going back and editing what you've already got, or having a look at what you've got and see what comes from it. With something like that, I think you've just got to pick something. If which two of my characters haven't had a big scene together, great. They're doing something, and there's a Zeppelin attack. Oh, whatever. Just with that one, I think was just sometimes if I couldn't think of something, just find something I hadn't already done and just make that happen. And that was actually quite satisfying. Sometimes some really fun stuff came out of that.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. And what about, so we've had a bit of a talk about, moving forward now that things are opening up and etc. Yep. But as far as, your short to long-term goals for your writing career, which is obviously off to a flying start, is there anything in your roadmap? Like, for example, are there any different genres that you're thinking of tackling down the track, or are you going to focus on a series, or are you going to spend most of this year trying to re-entering the marketing realm and try and take back that opportunity that should have been there last March? Or what sort of goals have you got set for yourself in the literary side of things?
Oh, well, at the moment, in order of priority, the first one is the marketing thing, which is, try to get that Champagne Charlie and the Amazing Gladys back out there and doing as well as I think it deserves to do. The next two are, now I'm going to have to self-publish that book. The other one is...
Definitely put that on the list.
The other one is my manuscript with the Frankenstein story, to go back and edit that and see if I can find a publisher there. I'll see if my current publisher wants it. I think I think my publisher probably wants it, otherwise I'll shop it around. And working on a sequel to Charlie and Gladys. I have quite a few notes. I've basically last year was kind of depressing, and Charlie and Gladys is a fun novel, and trying to write a fun novel when every time you turn on the news it's talking about horror and we were all there. We were all there in 2020.
Still happening.
Still happening. I know it hasn't stopped now. We sort of stopped.
We're just desensitized.
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of every so often you turn on the news and it's actually still just as bad as it was, but it doesn't affect you the same way, I guess, after all. So so I'm trying to finish that one off. So that's basically the 4 things I'm on at the moment. Obviously, I don't have the time to do any of them, but discipline, that's what it comes down to. Make the time.
Actually, that makes you raise a good point in regards to the difficulty of maybe writing a comedy in such troubling times or difficult times. But for someone like, for example, I myself don't write comedy. The more the dystopian thriller, almost horror, I suppose. So, for example, if I'm working on a book or a story or a particular scene, I may, through the editing, through the writing, through all those, pass-throughs, it might be 10 times I'll go over a particular scene. But from my side of things, I'm thinking, well, if for example, there's a violent scene or whatever it might be, a dark scene or a scary scene, it can always be refined, or I can be satisfied, if I read and go, oh yeah, that's dark, or oh yeah, that's it. I'm wondering how does it work when you are trying to write something funny or comedic? Because, if you yourself have to go over because the whole idea of a joke is to be unexpected. I'm wondering when you're reading it and reading it over and over again as you go through your different editing phases, do you find it a challenge to maintain an objective view of your own, comedic writings, or do you have a little rule for yourself that, if it was funny, then, do you know what I mean? Like, for example, a dead body's a dead body. If I'm writing, it's not something scary. It's not going to change anything. But there's nothing unexpected about, describing something like that. But for a reader, the comedy is in that. Oh my God, I can't believe you just said that, or a situation. But how do you keep yourself excited about humor when it's something that's not a surprise to you by at some point?
Well, if I'm going back to edit comedy stuff, I try not to mess with the punchline. Just sort of, you're just doing it, looking at things like making the sentences less clunky, having a look at things like the setup or the scenery. Once you've told the joke, sometimes I can come back to something I wrote a year ago and say, oh, that's funny because I've forgotten it.
Yes.
Yeah, but you're right. If you're looking at over and over again, you sort of just have to. You sort of just have to stop treating the joke as a joke and just treat it as a line of dialogue or just as an action that happens. And
that's fair enough.
I've described this fellow. I don't know what's saying this silly thing. Now I'm just trying to put that in the most succinct, as you would any other sentence. What's the best way you can say that? And just hope for the best, honestly. Because a joke does lose its humor if you've told it before. But then again, sometimes it keeps it. I mean, if you think of a joke that you've told at a party and then you've told it at another party, and you've told it at another party, and you always know what the punchline is.
That's a really good point, yeah.
But you still sort of think it's fun. I mean, partly that's sort of you're getting that reflected back from the people you're telling the joke to, but you still think it's funny. It will be funny to someone else.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because the gold in having it or telling the joke is because you're 99% sure of the reaction you're going to get, but it's going to be great to see their reaction because you know that it's going to shock or catch someone by surprise. So yeah. But at the same time, look, you mentioned last year it was difficult, but it must be, there must be a pretty cool to be working on a story like this in your head or the sequel because it's going to have those comedic elements. So it must be somewhat therapeutic to be able to sit there in a quiet moment over a coffee and when you're working out the next part of the story and maybe having a quiet chuckle to yourself as you come up with these comedic situations. So it must be pretty special to have a story like that blossoming in there.
It is. It is sometimes nice when you can come back to that. But I don't know. So some things you can always come back to, even if it's sort of been a terrible day. Like you're saying, if you're writing a horror story and if you had a terrible day at work, that's great. I'll just murder some imaginary people.
Yes.
But it's not always. Yeah, you do need sort of a bit of a right frame of mind to be writing jokes. Otherwise, it's just it can come off a little mean spirited if you're doing that. If you're doing that, like I say, if you're trying to murder someone with a joke, it can come off as mean spirited. Yes,
true. What I'm wondering is. In your Chronicles or any of your future adventures, do you think you're going to have a Leonid from In Search Of character pop in there anywhere?
Oh, I didn't think of crossing that over. Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you. I might.
No, that's all right. Yeah, no, because he needs to be brought back. Our new generation needs to be not creeped out, but just scared a little.
Yeah.
By someone who was completely wholesome and probably had no intention of scaring anybody.
Oh, no.
I don't think it was himself that was scary, though. It was more the way the shows were put together.
I think a lot of it was the music, that sort of weird, eerie electronic music.
The swirling synth strange, which is also similar to what made the intro to, back when I was growing up, the Doctor Who series,
when
that theme song came on at the start, that kind of said, right, things are getting serious now. Sun's going down outside, it's dark soon, and you're only an hour or two away from bed, and you're about to watch something that's going to leave you a little bit scared.
Mm-hmm. I love that show.
Yeah, still, I have to hand on heart say I haven't watched any of the really new stuff. Are you still a fan today with all the new stuff?
I still watch the new stuff. I have somewhat mixed feelings about some of the recent stuff, but look, it's sort of always been my thing. It's sort of, they could just have, a show where the Doctor comes out and sort of sits in the chair and reads the paper, and I'd probably watch it. But it's, but yeah, and I look, with that sort of stuff, the stuff you saw as a kid is always going to be better than the stuff you saw in middle age. It's just, there's just no way around that.
Yeah, and I think a very fond memory, and it goes way back. So this is before I could, I was still at that age where you can't quite differentiate, TV and reality. I was so excited because there was at my local library, there was going to be a special visit by one of the Daleks.
Oh wow!
And I was like, oh, I've got to go. And of course, I went, of course, and I was quite scared, but back then you just didn't compute that it was just someone hired a Dalek. To me, it was a Dalek off the show. So very vivid memory, and of course happened in one of my favorite places of all, the library. So yeah, absolutely. So things cross over in beautiful ways when you're young. But Ben, thank you so much for joining us for the podcast. I really do appreciate it. It's been so much fun talking to you. I mean, Frankenstein movies, steampunk adventures, what's his name, Carradine in Death Race 2000, and of course In Search Of, and all the the wonderful insights into what inspired you to write, and obviously the publisher. So congratulations on the publication of the book. I suspect that the hype, the readership, the interest is yet to begin.
Thank you.
There's a whole wide world audience out there, and the time will come. The time will always come when someone will find it, and I have no doubt your time's coming pretty damn soon. And for anybody who wants to enjoy or look into Mr. Hilton's book, then by all means, one place you can find it, at least the listing, is on the AustralianBookLovers.com website under science fiction, and there you can find Champagne Charlie and the amazing Gladys. And I can assure you, have a good read, click on Learn More, dive a little bit deeper into the story, and you can got the button there because you're going to want to grab it once you read it, and by all means do so. And look, have you got any live attendance, live events that you have scheduled for any time this year that you'd like to let the audience know about, in New South Wales or anywhere?
Don't have any at the moment. I'm not going anywhere outside of New South Wales at the moment. That sounds like a
yes,
risk.
Yes.
But yeah, no, not at the moment. But yeah, no, that's you can find me on my website, bghilton.com. I'm on the Twitter. I'm on the Facebook. I mostly talk about sort of random stuff that interests me, same as I write about, honestly.
Nothing better than to be random and write about it. Absolutely. It's like saying, let the imagination run free, and
yeah, exactly.
There's no such thing as a cage anywhere. Definitely. But by all means, we'll be putting all the links to your website and Twitter, Facebook, anything you've got there. You'll be able to find them in the show notes. Look, I'll even put a little link to a couple of things we've chatted about. But otherwise, again, thank you so much, Ben. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I really hope this year kicks off with a much bigger bang than last year. In fact, I know it will. And look, all the very best for yourself, your family, your amazing literary career that is only just beginning to get the steam going up. No pun intended. Thank you again for being such an awesome guest on the podcast.
Thanks, Aaron. Great to talk to you.
Excellent chat with BG Hilton. You guys covered so much.
Yes. Look, thank you again, Mr. Hilton. That was absolutely awesome. And I loved having a chat about In Search Of. I know I said that at the start, but any man who has a soft spot for In Search Of is a legend in my book.
Legend. Now, I'm going to say this is very well, it's not spooky, but I happen to be reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And given that you guys are talking about it,
Gothic.
I thought that's kind of spooky. Mind you, I got through, because there's kind of 3 volumes when I had a bit of a look at it, and I was listening to it on audiobook, but the audiobook cut out about just a chapter or 2 into the 2nd volume, and I just thought, you know what? I just don't know if I could listen to the really formal language. I think I would have been able to read it on paper, but I was trying the audiobook. But yeah, it was pretty heavy going. It's very,
I think I dabbled in it when I was a kid.
The old language. But yeah, I just thought, how interesting is that you guys start talking about it, and hey, I'm already reading it. There you go.
Well, there you go. Synchronicity at work.
Synchronicity, indeed.
Yeah, or spooky synchronicity.
So enough about Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I'm interested to know what quotes you have drawn from
Ooh,
your
I've got
conversations.
Yes, I've got
BG,
2 quotes, of
with Ben.
course.
Yep.
I was going to go for 3, but I thought,
Nah.
I won't push my luck there. And then
Yep.
we've got the Christmas special coming, so who knows
Yes.
what rules we'll break for that one. But no, I've got 2 quotes. And yes, it's a little bit about, I guess, steampunk and memory, really, because the idea of sort of going back in time and reimagining is something that we can do sometimes with our memories as well. So, so what about yourself? What inspired your quotes for today?
Well, it was more about reality and altering reality, and I guess humans' relationships with reality. So, the first one I've got is from Margaret Atwood. Many people will know her as being the author of The Handmaid's Tale, but she's a Canadian poet, novelist, literary critic, environmental activist and inventor. So lots more stories, of course, than just The Handmaid's Tale. Her quote, "You may not be able to alter reality, but you can alter your attitude towards it. And this, paradoxically, alters reality. Try it and see."
Oh, sorry, what was that last part? I was going
Try it
to
and
say
see.
I like it. Yeah, go
Yeah.
there, go out and see. I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it?
Absolutely. It really highlights that relationship. I think the reality is the relationship, isn't it? Because there's, I guess there's that eternal question: does reality exist without us, being aware of it? The chicken and the egg, I suppose. But yeah, that's a really, really cool quote.
It is a really cool quote. It's amazing when you look at the photos of her. She has the most beautiful smile. She's got these great cheekbones and she looks like so much laughter in her life. And then she writes some of these really deep things. I don't know if you've read The Handmaid's Tale and Oryx and Crake and a few others. But yeah, there's some really challenging things. So I think, reality and altering reality is certainly a part of her world. So there you go. Give us your first quote.
Yeah, so my first quote comes from a gentleman by the name of George Mann, and the quote is, "Steampunk is a joyous fantasy of the past, allowing us to revel in a nostalgia for what never was. It is a literary playground for adventure, spectacle, drama, escapism, and exploration. But most of all, it is fun." And that was by Mr. George Mann. So I love the idea of reveling in a nostalgia for what never was.
Yeah. So kind of just, nestling in your own imagination.
Yes, I mean, I know that as human beings, often we can ponder and sort of feel frustrated about the things that never were, as far as that perhaps hopes, things that we look back and maybe missed opportunities, etc. But to revel in the sort of memories of what never was, I think that's a beautiful flip side to that coin.
Yeah. Well, that's nice. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. My second quote is from Ray Bradbury, and any kind of, sci-fi bodies out there will know that Ray Bradbury is an American author and wrote science fiction, fantasy, horror, mystery, and some realistic fiction as well. One of the favourites, apart from Something Wicked This Way Comes, which is just like the best story, is one called Fahrenheit 451. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, it definitely rings a bell.
Yeah, so because they made it into a movie. I remember seeing it when I was a wee lass, and it's the temperature at which paper burns, I think, and in this dystopian. I just remember being horrified that they burnt all these books, and of course they would have actually burnt books in those. They wouldn't have been computer generated when they made the movie in 1966. And as a young girl who just loved books and had to borrow hers from the library, I remember being horrified at seeing all these books go up in flames. But anyway, that's not the quote. The quote is, "You must stay drunk on writing so reality cannot destroy you."
Okay. Yeah, that is a cool one.
How about that?
Yes.
Stay drunk on writing. Yeah.
Well, I guess, yeah. So in a roundabout way, I guess it's, by writing, you are in with some sort of respect, controlling or manipulating your reality. So I guess staying drunk in writing, or staying drunk with your writing, you maintaining that grip on reality in the sense of that you can twist it and turn it and shape it.
Yeah.
But as soon as you stop, then reality owns you, doesn't it?
Yes.
And you become that twig on the stream of life,
Yeah.
heading straight for that big waterfall. That's a super cool one.
Yeah, that's a goodie. All right, what have you got for us?
This one here is by Mr. Jeremy Irons, and it's a quite nice, quick, little easy one. The quote is, "We all have our time machines. Some take us back, they're called memories. Some take us forward, they're called dreams."
That's lovely.
Yeah, I think it's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I can hear his voice saying it, of course. You know, has it distinctive.
I wasn't going to try and do any impersonation because that would just be downright embarrassing for me. But no, I've always, our bodies may be, locked into time, so to speak, because obviously they can't transcend time. But the brain, what a cool thing. It can dissolve back into the past. It can ponder the future and all sorts
and dreams
of
are
stuff.
so important. They really are.
Yes, they are. And I wonder, how much of our reality has been shaped by powerful dreams. Yeah. Even maybe some fever dreams or a vivid dream that's woken you up, or maybe, a horror, a nightmare, for example, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Yes, who knows, those facets of life that we take for granted, that if we dig and burrow our way right to the source, turns out it was, inspired by some crazy dream that someone's had. Yeah.
And talk about, inspired dreams. One of the things that I was having a little bit of a look at, which was the 23 best steampunk books, they had an interesting definition of steampunk, which is kind of in there. So they say steampunk is science fiction after a few LSD-laced absinthe jello shots. It can include alternate histories, vampires, time travel, magic and romance. And this is where the segue is. As long as you feature some technology suggestive of steam power, you can go as crazy as you want. And several writers on their list have done exactly that. So, yeah, it's an interesting list. So it's under best sci-fi-books.com.
Well, they had me at LSD-infused absinthe jelly shots.
Jello shots, yeah. I thought, okay, so yeah, your imagination will be pretty damn good after that, yes. And as long as you put your goggles on, which seem to be pretty important in terms of steampunk. Not entirely, but and they've got China Mieville's Perdido Street Station, which I wasn't able to finish. It's so thick with detail. Just wasn't the right time for me to read that. But anyway, I might get back to it. There you go.
Oh, there you go. Yes, now you got. I've definitely got an image of the because they're kind of like aviation goggles. Really.
Yes,
you see a lot, don't you? Yeah,
definitely, because
sort of
they're often flying steam, doing like airships or steam engines and those kind of things. So yeah.
And of course, you get underwater steam.
Yes,
steampunk
the
stuff,
Nautilus, of course, Captain Nemo.
Yeah, which is so cool.
Yeah.
What fantastic artwork where that came with. Oh boy, as a kid, that was fantastic.
Yes.
See, that's what see. If I get super rich one day, which is probably never going to be happening, but I'd love to hire art departments from big movies and say, right, the lounge room. Can you please? I want the Millennium Falcon cockpit. Bedroom. Underwater steampunk. Oh, that's so good. Yeah.
Very good. Yuki might have a few things to say about that, but anyway.
Yeah, possibly, but
she can build her own wing of the house.
Yeah, well, literally, can have part of the Millennium Falcon. Nice. But thank you everyone for joining us for episode number 38, and I hope you enjoyed the interview with Mr. B.G. Hilton, and maybe you've been inspired to pick up a steampunk book. Maybe you've been inspired to jump on YouTube and search for the creepy old episodes of In Search Of.
Yes, indeed. Lots of good reading, lots of good watching.
Sorry?
Lots of good reading and lots of good watching.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. In Search Of. Now, I think, the zombie ones, there's the killer bees, there's ghosts, there's all sorts. But how do you think we should do the tagline for today? I'm thinking maybe calling out as though we're standing in a room full of pipes and steam going off, and
and see if you can put some steampunk behind it. Go for it.
Of course, we'll be able to find something. Absolutely.
All right. But of course, before we go, don't forget, if you enjoyed the episode, please leave us some stars on iTunes or your favourite podcast platform and send us, a few words is even better. If you'd like to know more about the books and the authors who are responding or who are supporting Australian book lovers, it's australianbooklovers.com. And you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Australian Book Lovers. And on Twitter, we are at Australian Books. The episodes are also on YouTube and LinkedIn, just so that we get everybody in. So please enjoy what we put out. And in the meantime, Darren.
Yes, I'm going to move back a little bit slightly.
Oh, okay. Yes,
I'm no voice actor at all, but I'm imagining myself as a little short man with goggles screaming above some steam machines that are all around me. So here we go. But yes, what you were saying.
Don't forget to read more Aussie books.
Now we'll see with the power and with the wonders of editing if that is can make it less embarrassing than I thought I was.
Yeah, I think the magic of editing, it will be brilliant as always.
All right, I'm putting my faith in that because there's not much faith in what I just did right now. No, but to everybody, thank you so much for listening to the Australian Book Lovers podcast, and I really look forward to joining you all again for the next episode for our very first Christmas special.
Indeed. Take care, everyone.
Yeah, until then. Bye for now and take care.
Let's meet again. Where magic happens.
Australian Book Lovers acknowledges First Nations peoples and recognises their continuous connection to country, community and to culture. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and honour the sharing of traditional stories passed down through generations. We're committed to a safe and inclusive welcome for authors and readers of all cultures and backgrounds, including people of LGBTQIA+ communities and their families.